ואורך וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח קומי אורי כי ואורך וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח חסדי מאיתך לא ימוש וברית שלומי לא תמות שאי סביב עינייך ורי כולם נקבצו באולם קומי אורי כי ואורך וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח קומי אורי כי ואורך וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח. It's time to rise up and shine. 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 אורי כי ואורך וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח קומי אורי כי ואורך וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרח קומי אורי כבוד אדוני עלייך זרח קומי אורי
Thank you. Shalom, חברות וחברים. And we were just listening to the beautiful song performed and written by our musician Shimon Smith, Kumi Ori. Shalom to all of our partners and friends from around the world, and thank you for joining our online program tonight. My name is Anna Kislansky. I serve as acting CEO of the Israel Movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism. And I welcome you to this event together with our partner organizations, ARZA, ARZENU, the WUPJ, and the World Union for Progressive Judaism. Last time that we met online was actually when we were celebrating Israel's 73rd birthday and Yom Ha'atzmaut. We were celebrating our country's achievements and our movement's achievements. But tonight we are here not to celebrate, but to identify, to learn and stand together as a movement while our country is under attack, and also inside we are torn with so many really harsh events. We will hear from leaders of our movement in Israel, and of course our partners outside of Israel. And hopefully we'll have time towards the end of the program to also open up for your questions. So we will start with our own member of the Knesset, Rabbi Gilad Kariv, who will give us a political social briefing of actually what's going on in Israel. So Rabbi Gilad, bevakasha.
So shalom, dear friends and colleagues. I must say that I'm deeply excited by the fact that almost 600 people from around the world are attending this session, this important conversation. This is for me, I assume for all of us here in Israel, is a sign for your ongoing support and partnership. I'll start by saying that this is the first international briefing of our movement that I attend, not as a president and a CEO, but as a guest. And I'm saying it mainly in order to suggest that the analysis that I will shortly share with you is my analysis, and it doesn't necessarily reflect the official views of our movement, but this is part of, I think, our pluralistic and open-minded conversation as a movement and as a global family. I will not refer to the current political situation in Israel, mainly because it is very difficult to predict what will happen in the coming few days, and the political landscape in Israel is shifting rapidly in the last few years. You can read about it in the different websites and newspapers, and I will address shortly the current events. Unfortunately, the state of Israel is caught in two extremely challenging efforts. The first is the military effort, the military operation vis-a-vis Hamas, and the other challenge is the internal challenge of the violent acts and riots that are taking place in the last few days, mainly in the Jewish Arab mixed cities across the country. Those two situations are deeply connected, and still we need to refer to each one of them with a different perspective. I will start with the military operation vis-a-vis Hamas. This operation was launched after a massive rocket attack led by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad on most of the southern cities of Israel. And one thing that was revealed during this operation is that Hamas invested in the last 7 years many resources in order to minimize the gap between itself and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And that Hamas today represent a very serious military risk to the state of Israel and to the Israeli citizens. And we saw it mainly by their growing ability to threaten most of the Israeli cities with rockets and missiles. This operation also revealed the strategy of Hamas to achieve two goals. One is to dramatically undermine the status of the Palestinian Authority, and it is connected to the political challenges inside the Palestinian society. And another goal which we need to identify is the attempt of Hamas to drag into this conflict the Israeli Arab, the Palestinian Israeli citizens, and actually to place aside the green light from a Palestinian perspective, and those are two extremely challenging developments. And here I think that we all understand why Israel has the solid right to defend its citizens, and more than that, why we need to address the military abilities that Hamas is developing in the last 7 years since the last military operation. At the same time, and here I share with you my personal analysis, it is clear that when you have a military strategy, it's important to add to it also a political strategy. And many times, and we don't have the time to go deep into this issue, many times when you don't have a clear political policy, it limits your military abilities and your military goals. And here I share with you my concern as a fresh Israeli politician that Israel has a very clear military strategy vis-a-vis Hamas, but we are lacking a clear political policy towards the future of our relations with the Palestinians and the reality that should be established in the Gaza Strip. From here, I do want to turn to the internal challenges and to share with you, and I'm sure you'll hear it from the other friends, that since 2002, we didn't experience such an intensive, challenging, and violent situation between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority here in Israel. And in the last few days, we saw harsh and terrifying sights from the city, from different cities, Lod, Jaffa, Haifa, Akko, most of the mixed Jewish Arab cities in Israel. It's important to say that the vast majority of Israeli citizens, the vast majority of Israeli citizens, both Jews and Arabs, are not involved in those violent acts. Yet we see once again the ability of small groups of extremists to set the agenda if the government doesn't identify the risk and doesn't draw clear red lines. And when I'm talking about extremists, I'm talking about Arab extremists, and I'm talking about Jewish extremists. And I think it is important because mainly we are extremely sensitive to those forces that are trying to use Judaism in order to promote their ultra-nationalist views. It is very important to identify the fact that there are Jewish communities inside Israel that are under attack, not only by Hamas, but also by Arab extremists. And this is the case in the city of Lod. It doesn't release us from the need as Jewish Israeli leaders to identify the fact that there are also violent acts done by Jewish extremists. This morning I visited the city of Bat Yam, and yesterday we saw terrible sights from this city, and in this case it was violent acts led by Jewish extremists. And here I want to add the following remark, and I will conclude with this remark. There are three components to the current failure of the Israeli government and the Israeli society to end those violent acts. I mentioned the first one. Unfortunately, in recent years, we see the rise of extreme ultra-nationalist fundamentalistic forces, both in the Arab community and in the Jewish community. And our movement, through the important work of the Israeli Religious Action Center, we were among the first NGOs, civil society organizations that identified this threat. And this is the first component. But there are two more components that should be mentioned. One, As we know from other places around the world, the weakness of the civil services in Israel, the fact that we have serious pockets of poverty and social distress, both in the Arab community in Israel, but also in some parts of the Jewish community in Israel. This is the ground for the rise of the extreme forces. And in the long run, unless we know how to build strong policies to address those social concerns, it will be very hard or difficult to defeat those extreme forces. And the last component I will mention, alongside to the many achievements of the Israeli government in fighting the pandemic, unfortunately, in the last 2 years, many of the arms of our civil service, of our executive branch of our government are paralyzed because of the political situation in Israel. And when we are asking ourselves how come the Israeli police was not able to block those violent acts during the last 3 nights, it has also to do with the fact that there are areas of serious civil weakness or executive weakness in the work of our government. And the combination of those 3 factors led us to this situation. I'm glad to share with you, and this is my concluding words, that in the last day, or actually today, we see more and more Israelis, both Jews and Arabs, understand the need to present the voice of the Israeli majority that is standing firmly against the violence. And I hope that in the coming few days, we'll see more and more Israelis, Israeli organizations, Israeli officials, and Israeli religious leaders that are taking a clear stand and clear acts in order to block this violence. So again, thank you for attending this session. Thank you for to the leadership of the IMPJ and all our partnering organizations. And I wish us all Chag Shavuot Sameach.
Thank you, Chaver Knesset, Rabbi Kariv. And now, please, Rabbi Leah Mulstein, the chair of ARZENU, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you, and thank you, Gilad. Thank you, Anna. Friends, I want to thank you for gathering here today, just days before the festival of Shavuot, in solidarity with our siblings in Israel and praying together for peace for the region. And so it seems appropriate to turn to the words of the prophet Micah, who declared, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah, out of Zion shall go forth Torah, and the word of God from Jerusalem. And Micah continued, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again know war. To this we say, Bimhera v'yameinu, speedily in our days. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Leah. Chaverenu, Rabbi Rick Jacobs, the president of the URJ, Union for Reform Judaism. Bevakasha.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, everyone, and particularly our Israeli colleagues for the strength and the vision and the deep sense of the collective work that you do on behalf of all of us. Can I just say that when we usually gather to talk about anything regarding Israel, it's complex, and there are different arguments, and there are all these different issues and values we wrestle with. But this is a moment, friends, that isn't complicated. This is about the deepest connection that we feel with our siblings in Israel. And they are under attack and we stand completely with them. There will be time for complex discussions and arguments and debates, and we hope that Member of Knesset Gilad Kariv will be leading not just us, but the entire leadership of the State of Israel. But at this moment, I want to just point out one thing. This was also a week when we were given the new Pew survey about North American Jewish life. And it is also the week when we read Bamidbar in preparation for Shavuot. So it's all about the numbers. Can I just say that our movement is still the largest movement in Jewish life? And to this moment, it's the largest Zionist movement in this moment. And 8 out of 10 of those surveyed said that Israel was essential, was critical. We feel that and we need to express that. I want to just give one piece of work to everyone on this call today. I think in terms of the media, I think we are losing ground. I don't think our case is being made well in media and social media. So let's all take it upon ourselves to be the people who communicate with our circles, our communities, and raise the voice of solidarity and love. We feel the sense of unity. Anachnu itchem, we are with all of our siblings, and thank you for all of us around the world for what we've done and what we do in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Jacobs. And Yerushalayim, Rabbi Sergio Bergman, the president of the World Union for Progressive Judaism. Welcome.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, the IMPJ, to invite all of us to be part of this worldwide extended family gathering. Shalom Yerushalayim, Samachti ve'omrim li beit Adonai lelech. Here from Jerusalem, part of this commitment from the World Union for Progressive Judaism, that we are only one, and not only with solidarity with Israel, that affirming that to be part of the Reform Liberal Progressive movement is a strong commitment to be Zionist. And this, for us, with our headquarters here in Jerusalem, we are supporting this global network of meaningful commitment to be Israel in every place that we are. We are not only supporting with solidarity our friends and fellows in Israel, we are taking Israel to every place that we are. We are part of Israel, we are a global family, and we pray and we work for peace for Israel and the region. Yeh shalom bimromav beinenu ve'atzmeinu. A peace that is not only that we ask from God, a peace that we share and we make together.
Toda Rabba, Rabbi Bergman, and from Jerusalem, from Yerushalayim, Yair Lutzstein, the chair of the Israel movement, of our movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism.
Shalom Chaverim. I'm speaking to you, as Anna just said, from Jerusalem. And here in Jerusalem, we were part of the opening act of these hostilities, at least vis-a-vis the missiles coming from Gaza. So far, nothing further. But before that, the Temple Mount, Sheikh Jarrah, the flag parade, and more, all here in Jerusalem, were part of the prelude. Hundreds of missiles were sent this afternoon and evening towards many cities, towns, moshavim, kibbutzim, and other settlements in the south and center of the country. No end in sight. As I speak, we receive news of more rockets hitting communities in our south. No less worrying, actually much more so in my opinion, is what's happening to the very fabric of our coexistence in this country between Arabs and Jews. Attacks and lynching in both directions. We have a police force that's supposedly understaffed, not professional enough, very unsophisticated and suspected of being political. Our national leadership has no strategic vision at times, no real game plan. All this leaving fertile grounds for terrible mobs, both Arabs and Jews. The lynching of an Arab in Bat Yam last night, which Gilad alluded to and which I watched live on TV, shook me to the core. So do synagogues being torched in Lod and Arabs stabbing Jews in that town and elsewhere. A young Jewish teacher in Akko who volunteered to accompany his students to a demonstration yesterday evening to ensure they don't become unruly, severely beaten by Arabs, in a coma right now in hospital. And on a personal note, I'm worried for my own son, for whom we didn't hear for 4 days while he was out at sea with his Navy comrades. Thankfully, we finally heard from him late last night as they were sailing back into port. Many parents here are worried for their kids in the army as ground forces seem to be amassing around Gaza. My dad lives in an assisted living home here in Jerusalem. I took him to a doctor's appointment earlier this morning. As I was leaving this home, I met a coveted employee of this place and mentioned to her that I'm more concerned with what's happening in this country internally than about the rockets coming from Jerusalem. She noted, as she sighed, that her son serves in the same battalion as Omer Tabib, a 21-year-old soldier killed yesterday by a Hamas Coronet missile, which hit the Jeep he was driving in Nativ HaAsara on the Gaza border. And on the movement front, our movement front, there are many challenges. Anna, our acting CEO, will speak about some of these a bit later. But let me describe just one logistical one. As Gilad mentioned earlier, and as I'm certain you know, we Israelis are in a relatively good place vis-a-vis COVID after more than a year of battling the pandemic. And people now want to see each other again in our more than 50 synagogues around this country, from Rosh Pina and Nahariya and Carmiel in the north to Yahel and Lotan in the Arava, not far from Eilat. The challenge, you ask? Balancing between the Ministry of Health's increasingly expansive COVID regulations on gathering for prayers in synagogues against the present IDF home front regulations limiting such gatherings because of the missiles coming in from Gaza. That might sound simple, trivial, and that's no mean task. Friends, we here in this country and in our wonderful Israeli reform movement will get through this dark period. But these are sad days in Israel, and we all have much to do, and we will all have much to do to repair after this current round of hostilities is finally behind us. I thank you for your solidarity. It really, truly means a lot. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom. The Lord will give strength unto his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. Toda chaverim.
Toda, Yair. And now Professor Ronen Be'eri from Mevaseret, and the chair of IRAC and board member of the IMPJ.
Thank you, Anna. Let me start with and welcome all brothers and sisters. I'm so happy and relieved to see you all. Let me start with just a personal story. My current war started when I got very close to a hit of a missile on Jerusalem on Monday at 6 p.m. on the first salvo. I was, after the alert, lying outside of my car with my head down, covered in my hands, and the missile landed about 500 meters from me. And I thought that was a shock. And we know that Israel knows how to respond to these shocks, and much has been said already about what's going on in Gaza just now. I wanted to concentrate on really what Iraq has been warning about for the last several years. The events taking place mainly in mixed cities in Israel are mainly driven from the Jewish side by the organization Le'ava, which we all were heard again and again by Iraq, that it is an organization dedicated to violence and racism, which we managed to prevent its head from running to the Knesset in the previous elections. And we uncovered in several actually shocking documentations their previous deeds in the center of Jerusalem, doing the very same things they are doing now all over the country. I'm, of course, referring to the Jewish side, but there is a very strong also Arab side to these events, as you've all heard. And it all reflects on a lack of governance. A lack of governance that is reflected by the very long period where we don't have a functioning government in Israel. For the very long period in which we don't have a budget in Israel. And this weakness calls for the extremists from both sides, as Rabbi Gilad said, to take the reins into their own hands and act violently. We are very saddened by these events. I'm personally very, very terrified by these events, but there is hope. I've just returned from an event taking place on the bridge overarching the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv road, an event organized by the communities of Mevaseret Zion, in which I live, Ein Rafa, Ein Nakuba, and Abu Ghosh, which are our neighbor Arab villages. And this event was sponsored by the mayors of all these villages. This event was a common call to stop violence, to stop incitement, and to return to the peaceful ways of coexistence that we all deserve. These events are taking place all over the country, and they give me huge hope that these bad days will go away. And as we have demonstrated in the past, our resilience on the military side on the one hand, but on the internal brotherhood and internal solidarity on the other hand will prevail at the end. And I thank you all for all your help and support in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Be'eri. And now we have two Israeli congregational rabbis with us. And the first one to speak will be Rabbi Galit Cohen-Kedem from Congregation Kodesh V'chol B'cholon. Brucha abaa, Galit.
Shalom, shalom, Erev Tov. I'm sitting here in my daughter's room because everyone else is close to our bomb shelter. These are the times of day that the kids are becoming more anxious, and every motorcycle or noise from the outside makes them jump and ask if this is the time to go into the bomb shelter. This has been going on for several days here. And I want to bring the voice of our congregation. That's usually not, unlike the congregation speaking after me, is usually not part of this. We're not on the borders. We're just outside of Tel Aviv. And it's a very mixed congregation. Some of my congregants voted for Bibi Netanyahu, and others voted for Gilad Kariv, and others voted for Yair Lapid. And politics are a very sensitive topic in our congregation. But one topic that we talk about a lot is education and our commitment to our children. We have many young families, many young children. We have over 200 children in our educational track in Holon, which started 10 years ago. And our biggest challenge right now is how to deal with this trauma and to help deal with anxiety without falling into the pit of racism and without falling down into hatred. How do you educate and how do you inspire children and parents to hold the complexity of this issue and to say, yes, we are afraid and we are angry and these feelings are acceptable and they are normal and we understand them and we have compassion, and still not lose the compassion for others who suffer. And I want to say that this has been a big challenge for me as a rabbi, as an educator, and as a mother. And I always go back to this beautiful midrash that is said around Passover when the angels are asking to sing the song of the praise of God when the Egyptians are drowning in the sea. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Almighty, turns to them and says, "Ma'aseh yadai tovim bayam ve'atem omrim shira." My creations are drowning and you are singing. And I find much inspiration by that. And I find myself teaching it over and over again. Even when your enemy is suffering, this is not a time to gloat. This is not a time to ask for vengeance. Vengeance is the outside, the peel of the core feeling of fear. And feeling fear is sometimes so intimidating, so difficult, but we have to be very honest, emotionally honest about this. Your support, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the sense here, and I've spoken to many congregants over the days, the sense is that we're secluded. No one understands us. No one's getting it. Everyone thinks we're wrong. Bat Yam is the city next to us. We are deeply disturbed and ashamed by the lynch that occurred there. My congregants are too afraid even to go and demonstrate outside. We are so afraid of violence. And with their younger children, they decide to stay home and not deal with this. And I can't even judge it. This is the situation. But the sense that our narrative and our story and the complexity of this situation is not being heard enough. And seeing you here, all of you here, and knowing that you are able to understand that we hold the two parts of the verse, right? Adonai oz la'amoite, and we need the strength. We need to be part of it, but we also seek for peace. So with your help and your support, I'm sure we will be able to overcome this as everything else.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Galit. And now Rabbi El Vurgan from our congregation in the Gaza envelope, congregation Sha'ar Negev. Bevakasha.
Shalom, everyone, and thank you for your care and empathy and your presence and your support. It gives me a lot of strength to know that so many people around the world care about what's going on. It's my third year as a rabbi at the Sha'ar Negev Regional Council, which is one of the regional councils that are in the Gaza envelope. And I'm still learning. I feel like I'm still in the process of learning the challenges of the area and also my role as a rabbi in the area and what I could contribute to those challenges and very complex dealing that people have to do with the situation. But the residents of Sha'ar Negev are very, very experienced. So I talk to people and they teach me a lot. They are also very traumatized. So I have to be very gentle, but I mainly listen, and I know now in my third year, I already know the problems that they are facing. And let me just make a short list, okay? So these days, and of course, it's not the first time, the main problem is, of course, the rockets, the missiles themselves, and the deadly cause of their hitting. But it also makes a lot of noise, and even if it doesn't hit, but you have sirens going on every 10 or 15 minutes during the night, then they can't get much sleep. The people also tell me that it's even more noisy, the Israeli bombing from the land and from the sky, bombing the Gaza Strip, and some of the kibbutzim that I work with are really even less than 1 kilometer away from the Gaza border. So they hear everything. And sometimes it's just all night long, they hear bombing from all directions. And sometimes if it hits electricity cable, then they will not have electricity for many hours. And of course, some of the roads are closed because it's the most dangerous thing is to be on the road when you have an attack. Of course, the schools are closed, so kids at home 24 hours. Another problem is, of course, the fires on the wheat fields, the balloon bombs that are being sent from Gaza. And as you all know, Shavuot is the time of the wheat harvest, and many of the farmers, and Sha'ar Negev still have many farmers and many fields. They had to cut the wheat ahead of time when it's still green and not yellow because they were so afraid it was all going to be burned. also, there's also this thing of uncertainty that they experience, because now you cannot plan. When you have a round of attacks, you cannot plan anything. You don't know what's going to happen the next minute. So of course, and this is, I'm saying it really sadly, all the special events that the kibbutzim were planning for the Shavuot, they have all these harvest ceremonies. They can't take out any of those plans. And of course, the events that I was planning as a rabbi to do in the kibbutzim, a lot of learning sessions and ceremonies, are all canceled right now. That's not the main problem, but just to show that it's on every field of life is being completely ruined right now. And I want to tell you that although I know it might sound like a very, very hard experience, there are things that I find very encouraging. So first of all, there's a lot of solidarity in our movement between communities. And in these days, we get so many suggestions and offers from other communities in our movement to host people from Sha'ar HaNegev who want to leave the area and with their children and go up north where it's safer and stay there for a couple of days. So that's really heartwarming that so many people in the movement see their need to support our community. And I want to tell you also that although the residents of Sha'ar HaNegev really want to see a solution for their security, for their very, very basic security, and they are pressuring to find a solution, they are not happy with the suffering of the people from the other side of the fence. And as my colleague Rabbi Galit said before, she stole my midrash, I also wanted to tell you about how I find so many people in Sha'ar HaNegev unknowingly that it's a midrash, right? But they're fulfilling the mitzvah of do not rejoice in your enemy's fall. And people tell me we are not happy to see all this bombing of the Gaza Strip because we know this is not the solution, because we know that a long-term solution should be a solution of peace and not a solution of bombing and war. And they want another they want to see another horizon of hope and solutions. They know that this kind of war is pointless, that this is just another round. They know that there will be another round after that one, and then another one, and then another one. And so they are, on one hand, despaired, knowing that it will always come back because there is no long-term thinking and no long-term solution. But I'm encouraged by seeing that people can still, within all this difficulty that they experience, they can still feel compassion and understanding to the suffering on the other side. And I just want to tell you that today, one of my community members who lives in the kibbutz Gevim sent me a poem he wrote. And immediately I sent it to all the different groups and it was just so moving. He wrote that he used you all know this sentence, right? In a funny way, the sentence, if you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk. And he used that sentence to say, oh, but we have to talk. So we have to replace missiles in words. And in Hebrew, they have similarity because missiles is tilim and words is milim. So he was playing with this in his poem and he said, oh, when are we gonna replace tilim with milim and start talking? And when are we going to replace lehashiv, which is like to respond? When are we going to replace that with lehakshiv, which is to listen? And so all his poem was about how we need to change strategy and how we are still looking for another relationship with the neighbors in Gaza. And so I just want, for the last thing, to tell you that I was inspired by that. And I know that now, I cannot hold any events right now with my community, but I'm using words. I'm using words of comfort, words of faith, words of compassion. I'm sending words wherever I can to the people. I'm through personal connections, I talk to people, and I find that this really helps people. People react, that the words encourage them and makes them able to still believe that peace is possible, and believe in dreams and believe in the way of peace. And I think that's the little thing that I feel I can do right now. I can use words to help people still not lose their hope for a better future. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Toda, Rabbi Yael. I was just on another call with your chairs, Noga and Nati, Noga from Kibbutz Mefalsim and Nati from Kibbutz Oraner. And we were all with about 14 other chairs of our congregations. And when we started the conversation, we said, well, we might need to, finish the conversation if there's an alarm coming. And they were like, forget about it. We've been having the alarms the whole day, and we're sitting in the mamad. Like they can go on, which I think is sad on one hand, and on the other hand, they are so inspiring and resilient, and you are as well. So toda. And as you mentioned before, many of our congregations that are sitting in the areas under attack have been able to stay sheltered, and it was really comforting for us to get all the invitations from our congregations in the north saying, especially to the residents of Sha'ar Negev and the Gaza Strip and the area around Gaza Strip, come, and we're opening our homes. We have had to make changes because of the situation in Israel, of course. Our pre-army Mechina program for young leadership, whose branches are in Holon and Jaffa and Yafo, do not have easily accessible shelters, and we've been forced to send all participants home. So it's not easy. They had plans to have a big program for Shavuot, and now they're home because they first and foremost were taking care of their safety and security. I want to say that we're not forgetting Rabbi Rick and Rabbi Bergman, your children. They're like our children. They are here in Israel. Finally, we had after a year, the kids of Heller High in Kibbutz Suba, and they actually had to also sit in bomb shelters. So we do care about them, and this is our responsibility to know and to protect them. And also the kids of Shnat Netzel, I know that they're now in Machon in Jerusalem, and they're safe. And we're so happy that they are here with us in Israel. We really, really miss you, and we miss them. So that's one thing. I want to say that we're really concentrated on inside work and on Tikkun Olam projects. I think Yair and Ronen and everybody who spoke before me really expressed their concern about the violence and about the really rift that is happening between Jews and Arabs in Israel. And we really try to encourage our shared society programs and encourage our rabbis and lay leaders that are involved in shared society programs to reach out to their partners. And they've been doing that, and really, we send always a message of stopping the violence and the madness in the streets. And we we're also, I want to say that we're also standing with other civil society organizations like Tag Meir and also other pluralistic Jewish organizations to send messages of peace and hope within Israel. It's really comforting to know that we're not alone, that we're talking about dozens of organizations really sending messages of calmness and peace. And it's also important for me to say that in just a few days, we will celebrate the holiday of Shavuot. And actually, after a year of online programming, we were really hoping and looking forward to face-to-face tikkunim, a whole night study and activities celebrating the holiday of Matan Torah and studying Torah. However, and studying and just sharing the opportunity to really engage in Jewish thought together. However, there is a big chance that again we will have to go back to online programming, and this time not because of the COVID pandemic. And I want to say that the word tikkun in Hebrew means fixing. And at this time, more than any time, we need a tikkun. And our movement is committed to fix the broken parts in our beloved country. So, and another one last thing I want to say, and I know it's going to be mostly in Hebrew, but prior to Shavuot, we decided this Motzei Shabbat, the Israel time, our rabbis and congregations will join together in a special online Havdalah program for strengthening and consultation, which will be broadcasted on our Facebook page, and you're all invited. We'll be happy to have you with us. So thank you for that. And I hope that you'll have an opportunity, I think you'll have an opportunity to ask questions or us to answer your questions. But prior to this, I want to call for Reuven Marco. Reuven is the co-chair of the IMPJ International Advisory Council. So Reuven, בבקשה.
תודה, אנה. שלום, חברים. From Netanya, the International Advisory Council to the IMPJ board, which I co-chair with John Garson of Toronto, Canada, is tasked with strengthening the connections of the IMPJ with its supporters worldwide. It is a platform to provide feedback and advice back and forth. While times are troubling, certainly for a father of 6 who all live here in Israel, some on active duty as we speak, it is a good time to read on behalf of all of us a prayer for peace. With your permission, I'll read it in my mother tongue. It's not my mother tongue, but my mother tongue in Hebrew, using the IMPJ and Maram's newly published prayer book, Tfilat HaAdam. And for those who follow us, it's on page 192. יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שתבטל מלחמות ושפיכות דמים מן העולם, ותמשיך שלום גדול ונפלא בעולם, ולא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. רק יכירו וידעו כל יושבי תבל האמת לאמיתה, אשר לא באנו לזה העולם בשביל שנאה וקנאה, וקנטור ושפיכות דמים. רק באנו לעולם כדי לעשות הטוב והישר לפניך. ובכן תרחם עלינו, ויקוים בנו מקרא שכתוב, ונתתי שלום בארץ, ושכבתם, ואין מחריד. והשבתי חיה רעה מן הארץ, וחרב לא תעבור בארצכם. ויגל כמים משפט, וצדקה כנחל איתן. כי מלאה הארץ דעה את אדוני, כמים לים מכסים. עושה שלום במרומן. הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, על כל ישראל, ועל כל באי עולם, ואמרו אמן.
אמן. תודה רבה, ראובן. We will now answer some of your questions. I have several questions here. One question is actually, I think, for Rabbi Kariv, asking, is it still possible for Arab parties to support a Lapid-led government? Can Gilad or someone else respond to this? So if Gilad is still here, that would be, is Gilad still with us?
Gilad's not here,
okay.
Anna.
Okay. So anyone?
What was the question? What was the question, sorry, Anna?
Is it, no problem. Is it still possible for Arab parties to support a Lapid-led government? And I don't know.
Well,
if the
as we speak, I understand. I'll say two words about that. I'm not the politician in the room, but I'll try to say it. I know that from the press that we're seeing this afternoon with Naftali Bennett saying that he's going to now entertain rejoining a right-wing government led by Bibi Netanyahu. The head of one of the smaller Arab parties, Ra'am, has come out with a statement saying that he was willing to entertain the possibility of joining in some sort of coalition, perhaps, or joining with some sort of an attempt to change the law so that Netanyahu or the prime minister will be elected in direct elections. I don't know what that means, but it's obviously he wants to remain in the game. The head of that Ram party, Mr. Abbas. So I don't know. I don't think the same is true with the other parties, but we'll have to see the other their major Arab party. But we're not certain about that. And as Gilad said at the beginning of his words, things are very, very dynamic at present.
Thank you, Yair. Another question is, someone wrote, the speakers are all very moving and the rockets are still inexcusable, but how to resolve the internal violence in Israel? I think some of us related, I think we related to that. I don't know, you know, resolving is not easy because it has a lot of components. I know what is our responsibility as a movement in terms of really not letting the extreme voices prevail, but actually sending a calmer voice and a voice that is reaching out to others. And I think we're not alone. I think that there are also, in terms of the politicians and the people who have official positions, people like mayors of towns, I can say that they are also taking responsibility, and they are really encouraging a lot of the nonviolent voices, and they are themselves are really talking about the fact that we should not, you know, be surrender to the violent voices, and they actually released a joint statement. Both Arab mayors and Jewish mayors, and of course there's also a lot of questions, and I think Gilad related to that about the police, and you know, we should obviously look into what can be done better, but we are trying, I think, and I don't know, Yair.
I'll just add one thing. I was on an earlier call this afternoon with my friend and colleague Yaron Shavit, who was a previous chair of our movement here in Israel and is presently the deputy chair of the Jewish Agency. And he mentioned the fact that he had just come from a demonstration that had taken part on the main road between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, when residents and the mayors of several communities in and around that area, around the ultra-Orthodox community of Tel Siston, Mevaseret Zion, Abu Ghosh, an Arab community, all got together, amongst others, who got together and blocked, together with residents of those places, blocked the main road between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and saying, enough is enough. We as a movement will take part in those actions. We have our advocacy arm, Iraq, that is going to be involved in that. I'm sure that as we move forward, Iraq has a lot to do in those areas, and we will continue. And I know that we value your support of those actions. It is education that is needed. It is activism that is needed. It is bravery, because it's not, as Galit said earlier, Rabbi Galit said, it is scary sometimes to be on the street. I can tell you, my daughter needed to go to the dentist today, and she said, do you think that where his office is, it's safe to walk? She's never asked me a question like that, not a day or at night. I said, go, it'll be fine. But in my heart of hearts, I was waiting to hear that she was there and was back home. So these are trying times.
Okay. So thank you for that. And I see the clock, and I see that we're supposed to not run the time. So I think that what we'll do is, if there are other questions, please write them on the chat. We'll try to copy them, and perhaps we'll try to answer them via email or through any other way. And now I would like to invite our friend Rabbi Josh Weinberg, the Vice President for Israel and Reform Zionism of the URJ. B'vakasha, Josh.
Thank you, Anna, so much, and thank you all of you for coming together, for standing in solidarity. You know, just in a few short days, we're going to gather, as we said earlier, to study Torah on Shavuot and to read that section of the Torah that reminds us of when we all stood as one people at the foot of Mount Sinai, preparing ourselves and just getting ready to receive that Torah. And the book of Exodus tells us that Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged ahar, that all of Israel, all the people of Israel stood there in front of the mountain. And Rashi reminds us in this famous saying that we were there, Ki'ish echad belev echad, that we were there as one person with one heart. And that's what we're doing here today together. We are standing here with one heart, all reaching out to our people in Israel, our movement, to stand in solidarity, to support you, to remind ourselves of who we are and what of our values and how resilient we are. And this year we have survived without a lot of the comforts of life, especially now. But there's one thing that we can't live without, and that is hope. So I want to invite you all to join me in sharing our collective hope that these days will get better, that we will work together as a movement, as a people, to build and to find peace. And we'll sing together Israel's national anthem, Hatikva. If you feel comfortable rising, I invite you to do so and join with me. Kod belevav pneima, nefesh Yehudi obiya. Fatei Mizrach Kadima, Ayin Tzion Sofia. Lo Avta Tikvateinu, Tikva Bashnot Alpayim, Liatam Choshi בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים, להיות חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים.
תודה רבה to everybody who's been here with us. לילה טוב.
תודה רבה, חברים. It warms our hearts to have you with us.
תודה רבה ולילה טוב. שבת שלום וחג שבועות שמח.
And let's
חג שמח.
a quiet night for all of us.